to Crime in Court. My name is Heather, and this is another stream on the Delphi case. So, we are going over the 3-day hearing that took place. And today we are on part one of July 31st, 2024, of the motion to suppress. So, last time, I can't remember what the motion was. Why am I forgetting? It Last time we went through the July 30th with Alan Purdy and Roland Purdy, sorry, with testimony from Roland Purdy, motion to dismiss. That's right. Okay, so the motion to dismiss hearing we went through, and today we're going to go through the first part of the motion to suppress. So this is to suppress the different confessions or admissions, whatever you want to call them, that he supposedly said. But there's a lot of problems with them. We know that she ruled that they're all coming in, but this is the actual testimony, the transcripts that was in the hearing that led her to allow them to come in. So let's go through this. There's going to be quite a lot. So we're not going to get through all of it today. I'm going to try to get this done in two parts, but it might be three. We will see, because one of the transcripts alone is 84 pages. So let's get started. Please hit that like button if you don't mind. It helps with the algorithm and whatever that means. You know, we all say that. These YouTube creators say it helps the algorithm. All right, so should we do Brian Harshman or Jerry Holman first? I don't really know what order they went in because it doesn't say, and we're only getting them, it was in this weird way that they portioned it out. I think let's go with Harshman first. Let's go with Brian Harshman. Yeah. Okay. All right. So testimony of Detective Brian Harshman given at hearing on motion to suppress held on July 31st. So we have Nicholas McClelland and James Luttrell and Stacy Diener for the state of Indiana. For the defendant, we have Brad Rosie, Andrew Baldwin, and Jennifer Auger, I think is how you say it now. I don't know. That's how other people say it. So this is Stacy Diener says the state would call Brian Harshman. The witness is sworn in. Questions by Ms. Diener. Please state your full name and where you're employed. He says, my name is Brian Harshman and I am employed with the Indiana State Police. What is your rank or position? I am a detective with the Indiana State Police. And how long have you been employed? December 4th of this year will be 30 years. And how many of those years have you spent as a detective? Approximately 17. During that time, have you investigated homicides? I've assisted in the investigation of homicides. And how did you become involved in this particular case? In early 2020, I was assigned to the United States Marshals Great Lakes Southern Regional Fugitive Task Force, which offered me opportunities to sort of pick and choose some of the things that I wanted to do. We hunted, we looked for fugitives, but during that period of time, I had been talking to then First Sergeant Holman, and had told him several times, "Hey, going on quite a while here. I'm sure you guys are burning the candle at both ends. I'm available if you could use any help." And he put me off and put me off for a few months. And then I asked him again sometime around maybe March 2020, and he agreed, and I kind of stepped in and started helping with the investigation at that point. So he inserted himself into this investigation. He told him several times. I told him several times that he would help. He put me off and put me off for a few months. So that means, like, you repeatedly came at Detective Holman, Sergeant Holman, whatever his title is at that time. You repeatedly asked Holman to insert yourself into this case. Finally, he agreed and called him, whatever, and he started helping in 2020. Question. Now, once Mr. Allen was arrested and charged, did your role change? It did. And what did it change to? Once he was arrested and detained, I began to monitor his communications from the facility where he was housed, sort of inadvertently appointed myself, I guess, the caretaker of the phone calls and some of the video footage. Uh, What? So he inadvertently appointed himself. I don't know how that works, but okay. Um, he became caretaker of all of the communications footage, things that we were receiving from the Department of Corrections. When I talked to now Lieutenant Holman about it, it seemed like a smart thing to do to have one person concentrating on that, just due to the volume of the work that was involved in keeping up with everything. In your law enforcement experience, is it not uncommon or maybe even routine to monitor calls using something like GTL that are being made by an offender while incarcerated? He says, yes, I've used that numerous times during the course of my year or career, sorry, during the course of my career. And so you were familiar with the process with regard to Mr. Allen at the DOC, is that correct? Correct. And how do you access the calls? Just to inform the court, how do you go about doing that? When Mr. Allen makes a call from the facility, I'm notified via a text message that a call's been made, and it basically tells me what time and who, and it shows me a number that the call was made to. At that point, then I can get on a website through GTL and I can I can pull the call up, and then I can listen to the call and content of the call. When you began this task, did you start at the beginning and have you made it to the current date, or where do you stand on that? I am currently completely up to date on all phone calls that have been made by Richard Allen. And when Mr. Allen makes a phone call, are you documenting relevant information? Yes, I keep and creating a report. I keep notes and then calls that I believe may contain pertinent information. I notify Lieutenant Holman and Investigator Mullen, and Investigator Mullen will generally send that call to a stenographer or to get a transcript written. And I'll usually put that in the state police case report system. It involves so much time that there is a backlog on those, but I do know that, once they're transcribed, then Investigator Mullen has a copy of the actual transcription too. So, would you agree that that's one of the items of ongoing discovery that accumulates because the calls are being monitored, and if there's something significant, there's a record being created and you then document it? Yes, it never ends. It goes every day, it continues on. So, have you also you said you were reviewing video that's recorded within the DOC. Can you be specific as to what video? Because we all know that there's in-cell camera video and then there's also movement video. The video that I've reviewed is the movement video that the Department of Corrections utilized when moving Mr. Allen from one place to another. Just recently, and I'm not completely finished with all of them, but just recently I received, I believe, the bulk of the video provided by DOC reference, the medical specific transports. And then I do have the in-cell video access to that too, which I believe I'm current on, but there's just so much of it I'm not completely positive, but I believe I'm current on it. Okay, and we're here about a motion to suppress Mr. Allen's statements while made in DOC based on his environment coercing these statements. So you've been notified of that, correct? Correct. And you've been watching these videos and listening to these calls, so you're hearing in phone calls Mr. Allen's perspective on his circumstances, are you not? Correct. And then you can also watch the video and how he's being moved around the facility and how he's being treated by the staff that appear in that video. Is that correct? Correct. Now, we've been advised that when he's moved, There's at least two people moving him and one person recording. Are there oftentimes other people present that are part of staff? So they just go around recording him when he's walking from place to place in the facility. Why? Why him? Why is he so special that he gets people monitoring him 24/7? Like that closely? I don't understand. He says, I would say that as far as your statement about a minimum of, I don't believe I've ever seen any less than that. There are times I believe when there are more, so more people guarding him. There have been times when Mr. Allen has been maybe less cooperative than other times, so I think they've had extra people in the area on for that, but I'm not positive. When I refer to staff, I mean to include nursing staff, medical staff, those should probably go together. But let me say, Dr. Martin, maybe Dr. Walla. And so, were you able to observe times where he makes incriminating statements in the presence of more than just a medical provider? Yes. And then there are instances where it is a medical visit, correct? Correct. Says the has your observation of how he is treated by the staff that moves him indicated to you that there has been any sort of change from beginning till now? So I would say in Westville, we're talking about so from December of 2022 to December of 2023, when he was at Westville Correctional Facility, was the staff treating him with respect and were they patient with him? Yes. Professionalism shown by the DOC is almost over the top, more so than any I've seen in a custodial facility. Okay, now that's taking it way too far. I don't believe you now at all. You're not a credible witness. No, this is not true. Sorry, but no. This person wants to say that they are over the top better than any other facility you've ever seen. Give me a break. They had him on like dog leashes and they're giving him shots of Halidol against his will. I believe that due to the nature of Mr. Allen, whether people were told or they just assume, I think they that everybody knows that due care and professionalism and also, these officers are not stupid. They're being videotaped the whole time. They've got a camera in their face, so so they know. But yes, I've the patience and the professionalism from the DOC is sometimes unbelievable given the circumstances that they deal with. The circumstances that they deal with. Okay. Even when he's in a state of being covered in feces and needs a shower, and they're taking care of that in a respectful way to the extent that they can under the circumstances. Correct. Okay. So there's this period of time when confessions are being made. You've been reviewing some of those, correct? Correct. So if they are a phone call to his wife or his mother, have you reviewed those? Correct. If they are during a movement within the jail while he's being recorded by what you would call transport staff, have you observed those? Yes. And some of those actually involve movement to a medical facility or a medical visit. Is that correct? Yes, ma'am. Okay, is there any other category of observation you've been able to make with regard to confession statements? No, I believe just the telephone calls, the videos, and the movement videos, and then movement videos to the medical, which again, I've seen most of, but I still have a few of those to go through. And then also noted that during this whole process, I've also been involved in what the self deletion companion door sheets, the notes that were written there. So I would get with Investigator Mullen or Lieutenant Holman, and I would notify them, or they would notify me if they saw on the door sheets something that looked pertinent that was documented by either an inmate like a self deletion companion or an officer. And in a result of those door sheets, then I did follow up and conduct numerous interviews with Department of DOC officers, reference their state or their statements. that they recorded on the door sheet. So the door sheet must be like where people are putting notes, and these are the people. So there's people that are just watching him. I mean, there's people that they've assigned to just watch him, and some of them are inmates. So they are these, they're calling them a self deletion companion, or I think there are some other words that they use to describe them too, but they literally have people just standing there watching Richard Allen constantly and recording, taking notes. This is horrific that this is happening to anyone. Regardless of what you think he did, this man does not deserve this. All right. And then you prepared reports on those as well as those would be part of discovery. That's correct. They reports were created and the interviews were also recorded. Transcribed, or yes, I know, not sure. I know that most of them are. I hate to say they all were so far. Okay, but I believe so, yes. So, if in reviewing this volume of information from a perspective of phone calls and videos and self deletion companion sheets, did you observe any external factors that introduced themselves in April that coincided with Mr. Allen starting to confess? He says, one of the things that I was able to note, and I you got to keep you got to kind of keep in mind to date, I'm somewhere between 650 and 670 total phone calls made by Richard Allen while he was detained. A lot of calls. Breaking that down into hours, we're somewhere in the 150 to 170 hours of just phone calls, not including any video or anything else that I've watched. So the volume of calls is immense. So I feel, I've been able to pattern his conversations and what's going on in his world just by the simple fact of the amount of time that I've spent listening to the conversations. Bitch, you don't know him. Just because you listen to a few of his phone calls while he's in prison under duress. But okay, this guy's an expert on Richard Allen now. And one of the things that I noticed was early in March, Mr. Allen began to become involved in reading a Bible. And as such, he proclaimed numerous times that on March 21st, 2023, he found Jesus Christ and he found God, who I thought were one and the same, but he found them both. So some of those, that statement was followed up by some calls where Mr. Allen clearly believes that he made statements that, he may very likely not be his with family again in this lifetime. I don't know. I don't know if that's a typo or just bad language. He was concerned, and what he wanted to make sure is that if when they were in heaven together, so him and his family reuniting in heaven, that when they got to heaven, he could go to heaven too. And it was interesting because that change of his demeanor really began to coincide with just several days later after the confession started. They're saying he found God and started confessing then. That's what they're trying to portray here. All right, question. And how would he himself relate the confessions to his finding God and being concerned about his future beyond? I mean, beyond this world, heaven and hell. He says, yes, and he would have these conversations with Mrs. Allen and his mother. They all seemed to be very religious people, and they had conversations, and he had extensive conversations about, if things don't go his way, then he wants to try to make sure, and oftentimes he says that he's not even sure with what he's done, and the fact that he's found God is going to be enough to get him to heaven. Alrighty. When you say he's not sure what he's done, what do you mean by that? Well, and that's sort of what he alludes to. He doesn't really go any further than that. He just talks about, I think he mentioned sins. Oh, the sins that he's committed. Okay. But nothing specific as to particular sins when he's talking about that. Oh, sorry, that was an answer. But nothing specific as particular sins when he's talking about that. Question. This is confusing when they interrupt themselves. Sorry. question, but he does talk about the crimes he's charged with in this case. Yes. Oh, yes. Come on now. Okay. And does he talk about with them with specificity? Yes. Yes, he has confessed and he has talked about these crimes very specifically. And are we talking about one time or multiple times? I tried to find a way to put it in a numerical sense because there are varying degrees of what I believe is, there's some confessions where it's just, I did this, and this. And there are some where you sort of dance around the outside of it, but just direct confessions that I've been able to find, telephone calls, the videos, the door sheets. I'm 60 plus confessions at this point, and that's a conservative number without a doubt. Okay, Detective Hirschman. He's 60 plus confessions in. Okay, and in the ones that are more specific, does Mr. Allen include details that only a person involved in the crime would potentially know? I believe that's correct, yes. And does he, like what? Like he's not being specific in any of his answers. And does he ever talk about an obligation as a Christian to be honest and make things right? I don't recall that exact phrasing, so I'd be hesitant to say I'm not sure. Okay, how is his confessions to his family received in these calls? Generally, the first confessions were obviously Mrs. Allen and the mom were extremely upset, rightfully so. I mean, it's difficult to listen to, his conversation with them about it because, that's their husband, their son. Clearly, it's an extremely difficult time for them. As the confessions went on, Richard's mother, would say, they're messing with you, they're messing with your mind, which is probably true. Kathy would kind of reiterate the same thing. Oftentimes, Kathy would tell him to stop talking. There were, there's at least once, Mr. Allen was talking and she said, stop talking. And something along the lines of, I'm going to call Brad. And the call ended. So I don't know whether it ended on her end or his or Mr. Allen's end. So initially, disbelief, shock, I would say upset. And then as some of the confessions kind of went on over a period of time, it became a sort of change the subject, stop talking about it. We're not going to talk about this. You don't know what you're saying. They're messing with your mind. So again, like that's pretty strong evidence to me that they could be messing with his mind, trying to get him to, coerce him into a confession. That was kind of the direction it went after that. Do some of the statements actually include motivations for the crime? Yes. And do some of the statements relate to why he would have delayed in confessing? Yes. And did some of those relate to how his family might react to the reality that he committed the crimes? That's correct. These are all very leading questions. Is there a period of time where he does not communicate with his family, either by their choice or his, as a result of him confessing? Yes. There's been some periods of time where, for various reasons, he's gone an extended period, at least by his standards, of not communicating with the family. And I think at one point his tablet broke or he broke his tablet, so he had to wait to get another one. I think that he maybe had lost his communication privileges for a while for some incident that happened at the department. I don't know what that would have been, but other than that, he's pretty consistent in calling. Is it correct that he has a concern over whether his family will still love him if he gets convicted of these crimes? Yeah, I would say that that's probably the biggest common concern that I hear over and over again. No matter how this ends, will they still love me? Will you still be there? That is so sad. Extremely concerned about what happens as a result of this trial. You indicated recently that you reviewed or found a statement that you thought related to him having a conversation with Kathy about how this is impacting her and that he would contact the police to make a statement. Can you share that account with the court? In November of, I think it might have been the second week of November in 2022, and this is early in his incarceration. Or his detention. This is just weeks, probably. He makes the statement to Kathy, if this becomes too much for you, just let me know. I'll talk to the detectives and tell them everything they want to know. This is, again, it's hearsay though. He's like reiterating the conversation. So I really want to know what his exact words were versus what this guy is testifying to, because he might not have said those exact words and you're putting your own spin on it. Once he experiences his family not wanting to talk to him, is it sometime after that, or not wanting to talk to him after he confessed, does he then cease or reduce the amount of statements that he's making about confessing to the crime? Yes, I would say probably the bulk of the confessions started in early April and probably continued on until through June, maybe into July. And after that, they started to really slow down as far as what I would consider the direct confessions. There would, there's always, we, even still after that, we still have the conversations about, will you love me, no matter what happens, no matter, he was there was a period of time he was extremely concerned about what the family was going to see during the trial. He was concerned about, the things that were going to be said about him, and he was really concerned about the photos that they were going to see of what he was accused of. I mean, that doesn't make him guilty, being concerned about what his family is going through. That doesn't necessarily make him guilty, but he's equating that to guilt, I guess. So it seems. In fact, he indicated that he didn't want to see what he had done. Is that correct? That's correct. And then, so when was that? Like, give me specifics on that. He indicated he didn't want to see what he had done to them. What was that like during police questioning? They were trying to show him pictures of a crime scene that he had nothing to do with and he didn't want to see it because he didn't want to see those images, maybe? I don't know. Infuriates me. All right. So, in fact, he indicated that he didn't want to see them. That's correct. And then he gets moved to Wabash Valley. And does he make any statements while at Wabash Valley that would be considered confessions? In February this year, he made a statement that was documented by a Department of Corrections guard. I don't have the report with me, but it was somewhere along the lines of he was talking to himself and he apologized for maybe taking the lives of AW, I think. To feel comfortable, I would want to review my report and make sure that that's correct, but that's the gist of it. Okay, would you recall a statement that he made to his mother in January of this year in a recorded phone call that he wanted to tell the truth and be honest and just didn't want to hurt his family? I have heard those calls. As far as the timeline, if you're telling me January, then I believe you, but I'm not completely sure on the timeline. But yeah, I've heard calls to that nature. He has said those things in phone calls. Yes. Okay. In your survey of all of this information that you described and in your interviews with officer companions that were logging his activities, those are the other people that are watching him, they're called officer companions that were logging his activity at Westville. Did you ever learn any information that led you to believe that he was being coerced or induced to make incriminating statements? I did not. One of the things that I really checked on during the interviews was, if the behavior between the DOC personnel and Mr. Allen, and also then if the DOC personnel witnessed any other personnel having adverse interactions with Mr. Allen, and by far the overwhelming consensus between the guards is if they felt like he was treated they felt like he was being treated better than, and then he gets cut off. Bradley Rosie says, I'm going to object at this point to speculation and where he's testifying in bulk about a bunch of guards are thinking and feeling. I think it's a bit beyond what the evidentiary rules permit, which is something that has some indicia of reliability in a case like this. It's hearsay. That's what I was saying. This is all hearsay. Ms. Diener says, Judge, the officers who are relaying their impressions to this officer while he's interviewing them are giving him statements based on their observations, direct observations of Mr. Allen. I think it should be admitted. The court says, overruled. Rosie says, thank you. So he won that one. So there's some reference to. Oh, wait, no. He did not win that one. He lost. Sorry. So there's some reference to Mr. Allen feeling tortured. With regard to the defense's motion and memorandum, was has there been a reference to that in the materials that you've reviewed? Yes, Mr. Allen does state a lot that he feels like he's being mentally tortured and he has been pressed by family, are they hurting you? Are they making you? And as far as physical torture, he always says no. He believes that psychological mental torture is what they're doing, and he equates that to functions like it's loud in the prison at night and it keeps him awake. The lights are always on and it bothers him. And he correlates a lot of those activities with being a torture tactic that the DOC is using to mentally and psychologically affect him. These are also tactics that are used in, prisoners of war, people who want to torture their victims, things like that. So, yeah, uh, the light that never turns off, that's a problem. And why is it always so? I mean, it's prison, I get it. There's probably going to be noise, but during the night hours, is it always noisy? Why can't he sleep at night? So maybe are they blasting noise into his cell? Are they keeping him awake at night? Because that is another tactic to torture someone to help to prevent them from sleeping. The light on, constant noise. If you can't sleep, you're going to act in different ways that most people wouldn't in their right mind. All right, so question. So let's go back to what Mr. Rosie has objected to. You were going to share with the court the impressions of the guards with regard to Mr. Allen. Do you recall your statements that you were going to make about that, that you had relayed to you, that they had relayed to you? He says, I do. Okay, could you please share that? He says, yes. The guards shared with me that they believed Mr. Allen was receiving treatment that was above and beyond what normal inmates at the facilities were receiving day in and day out. I call bull again. He's really overdoing it in his words and above and beyond. You know, uh, eh, he's trying to be very descriptive and saying things like always and better than any other facility he's ever seen. That's overgeneralizing, making it like um, putting a more positive spin on it than it actually is. So he's saying he gets above and beyond what the normal inmates at the facilities were receiving day in and day out. And I don't know how to really phrase it other than it created almost a, between the other inmates and Mr. Allen, it creates it was noticeable enough that everybody like on the range would know that Mr. Allen was being treated different than the rest of them. Different in what way? Different in a better way. Correct. Oh, sorry, different in a better way. And did any of the officers that you interviewed relay their impressions that Mr. Allen was feigning or faking symptoms of psychosis to portray himself as crazy? Or, yeah, I would ask each and every one that they thought of the antics that Mr. Allen would portray, and without hesitation, Miss Rosie says, Judge, I'm going to object. Can I ask a preliminary question? The court says yes. Miss Rosie says, are you communicating what some offender told you about their impression about Mr. Allen's psychiatric state? No, I was making a statement on what a DOC officer told me he believed Mr. Allen was doing. Right, about the way he was acting, whether or not it was a legitimate psychiatric issue or whether he was faking it, right? That's correct. Mr. Rosie says, okay, I object. Again, we're getting a little far off field of the basic, hearsay admissibility rules. These people, these guards, have no qualifications to draw conclusions about psychiatric circumstances, in addition to the fact that it's hearsay. So I don't think that it is beyond the I'm objecting for that reason. Ms. Diener says, Judge, I'll rephrase the question to ask if officers relayed to him that they felt he was faking when he was acting out during April and May. I think that in a position of a corrections officer at a DOC facility, that they would be in a position to give a lay person's opinion about what they were observing. The court says, well, but not as it relates to psychiatric symptoms. I would sustain the objection on that. So we actually did get a win on that one. Ms. Diener says, I'll rephrase the question. Officer Harsh or Detective Harshman, did you ask them questions about Mr. Allen's behavior not being consistent during the period of time that he was confessing? He says, I did. Did they talk about him engaging in behavior described as bizarre? Mr. Rosie says, I'm going to object again. I'm not even sure who he's even talking about, like who these people are. She's just saying, did they? So there's not really an indication of who. Ms. Diener says, officer companions. Mr. Rosie says, who he's speaking with that's saying these things. The court says, can you narrow it? She says, yeah. Ms. Diener says, yeah. Were there specific instances that you were interviewing a particular officer companion who documented a confession that coincided with behavior that would be considered bizarre? Yes. Okay. And did the officer make any statement to you with regard to having an opinion about whether Mr. Allen was faking? Same objection. Overruled. Yes, they believed he was faking. Like, again, how do they know? They do not know. They don't have qualifications to opine on someone's psychiatric conditions, let alone if they're faking them or not. Just ridiculous. And this judge lets it in. Okay, as you sit here today, you can't tell me specifically which officers told you that, correct? Because you don't have your notes in front of you. Correct. Okay, did more than one officer that was a door companion for Mr. Allen share that observation or opinion? I can tell you that I did check and I interviewed a total of 10 of those officers, and going back in my reports, I would be surprised if 8 out of the 10 didn't have the same feeling about that. This guy is something else. In reviewing the documents that you described, the door sheets, the phone calls, the video of movement, did you ever find evidence that someone was interrogating Mr. Allen? Not once. No other questions. Court calls Mr. Rosie to ask questions in cross-examination. Where's my water? Okay. Cross-examination of Detective Brian Harshman. Questions by Brad Rosie. Were you able to watch some of the videos of the inmate companion sitting at his doorside? The videos that I had access to did not have any inmate companions in them. They were the videos that were used by the personnel during movements. Now, if there was a companion caught in the frame when they were moving him, I would see a companion. I did not have like a hallway view. I had a cell view, and those were the views of the movement. So you have no idea what the conversations were between the inmate companions and Mr. Allen, do you? No, that's correct. So, from the very beginning, when Mr. Allen was incarcerated, there was a plan in place to monitor his communications at the prison, right? Yeah. And that plan involved getting in touch with GTL and getting access to the phone calls, right? Correct. And making arrangements with the DOC to obtain video and cell video of Mr. Allen 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, right? That was outside of my lane. That wasn't my responsibility, but I did receive those after the fact. Yes. That was part of your job. That was part of your job was to review all that as well. Yes, but I was not part of the making contact with the DOC and requesting that, so no. Okay, so some other officer was doing that, but you were getting the product. That would be fair. Okay. And that also did it involve you getting access to his phone calls from the rec phone? It's my understanding that any call that utilizes his DOC PIN, other than his legal team or attorneys, is recorded on the GTL, and that's my understanding. If it's different than that, I don't know. Okay, and do you have a phone that they use to bring on the block, or was like a mobile phone that they would use every couple times a week? That who would use? The inmates. Regular inmates, I don't know what they utilize. Mr. Allen had a tablet that, best I can tell, as long as it's charged, he can make calls anytime he wants to. And you have access. You had access to those too. Those that were recorded on the GTL. What about his digital communications through the tablet? The text messages? Yeah. Yes, I have access to those also. Okay, so there is no privacy afforded to him in any respect when he was in that cell in terms of his communications with the outside world, was there? And when he makes the call out, he's notified of that. Everything is monitored and recorded before he makes the call, and even the folks that, like Ms. Allen and his mother, are also notified on the recording that, hey, you're receiving a call from correctional facility and it says Ricky, and it says these calls are subject to monitoring and recording, and then the call's connected. Do you agree with me that there's no privacy afforded to him with regard to any of those calls because you knew everything he was saying basically the minute he said it, correct? I do not monitor in real time. I would have been after the call's completed. Okay, then I get notified. But no privacy was there. That's fair to say. Okay, and in fact, that would be the only way for Rick Allen to talk to his family about the circumstances surrounding the case, wouldn't it? Or through his attorneys. Well, but to talk to them directly about his case, he'd have to do it on the phone, right? Yeah, that's correct. The most important thing in his life, right? He's incarcerated, facing accusations like these, right? Yeah, he did talk about the case to his family, and he's not even able to do that without the police listening to that, is he? No. So there was a pretty involved process to make sure that all his information funneled to you pretty quickly, wasn't there? I don't think quickly would be a fair statement because nothing seems to funnel to me quickly, but yes, I do receive the information. Okay, what kind of friggin' dumb answer is that? But sure. Well, you just said a little while ago you were getting text message notices. Well, yes, I do get that. When he made, I'm talking about everything as a whole, videos, etc. So if you're talking about the calls, yes, I am notified on the calls after he completes the calls. You ever mention another offender at the DOC like this? Or, I'm sorry, you ever monitor another offender at the DOC like this? He says, yes, I have over the years, several. Okay, anybody that's been detained in the DOC awaiting trial for something they haven't been convicted of? No. So any of the people that he's ever been monitoring so closely have already been convicted of their crimes, but not Rick. This is the first time you've ever been in a situation where you were surveilling someone in Rick Allen's circumstances. The only difference is because of the DOC. I mean, the county jails, yes, I monitor a county jail, somebody who's waiting. All right, awaiting trial. And you've never dealt with anybody up at the WCU, have you? Inmate wise? Yeah, in the maximum security unit within Westville. No, not an inmate, no. So when you're watching these videos of him in his cell, you're seeing everything that he's doing, correct? Correct. If he goes to the bathroom, you get to watch, don't you? Not exactly what I want to do all day, but yes, I do see it. I understand that, but that's just the reality of the environment he's living in, right? Yes. The DOC offers, from a professionalism standpoint, the DOC officers, from a professionalism standpoint, have been over the top, you said? That's my opinion, yes. Okay, in what ways? Tell us. How is he getting treated better than anybody else? How? Okay, so you see the videos of the DOC officers with their Odin patches on their chest? I have not seen any Odin patches on anybody's chest. And did you see the video? Strike that, are you aware that there were officers up there with patches on their chest that said, I hate people? No, I'm, I've not been aware of those patches, no. Okay, did you see the video of him being transported in to get a haircut, where the DOC officer realized that he had something on his chest and he ripped it off of his chest? A patch? I remember a couple of times for a haircut, I believe. I do not remember seeing somebody ripping a patch off. No. Okay. Did anybody amongst law enforcement communicate any of that to you? At one point, obviously, there was talk about somebody having patches at some point. Again, outside my lane, so it wasn't anything I was involved in, so I don't. Well, you interviewed a bunch of guards, right? Yes, and as far as I know, none of them were involved in any of the patches. Did you ask them? Yes. Okay. And so they all denied it, the ones you interviewed. Yeah, they denied it. Not one of the guards that you interviewed mentioned that they had anything to do with these patches or the Odinism associated with that. Correct. None of them mentioned it. You think there's something or anything unusual about an inmate that's in confinement turning to God as a way to deal with the circumstances of that confinement? No, I would imagine that the stresses associated with that confinement would lead people probably to try to, find God. He says a lot of. Well, one of the only things that Rick had in his cell was a Bible, right? I would say that's fair. I think he's got some magazines and some other stuff, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, he doesn't have a lot of stuff in his cell. And then when you put him on close supervision, then they even take his blanket from him, don't they? I would say that there's a reason for that. Yeah, the answer is yes, right? The answer is yes, they take his blanket. So they strip him down to the bare essentials, right? That's outside my lane. That's how those are decisions that I don't make. But yes, he would have less stuff in his cell, I guess. Yes. Right, which you would be seeing on the videos. There's really nothing in there. No, there's not a lot in there. Yeah, and he also for long periods of time had to wear a kimono, didn't he? That's interesting. They called it a self-deletion smock. But yes, I did see those. Weird. You acknowledge that he had said things to officers and companions about this offense that are inconsistent with what happened at the crime scene. I did not say that. I don't believe. Okay, you ever hear him say that he shot the two girls? That he shot them? Yeah, in the back. I don't know that I heard him say that. I understand what you're talking about, and I don't know. I don't think I don't think that's something that I heard him say. I don't know if that came out in an interview from somebody or not. I would have to check and see. That, I just don't know. Sounds like something you heard during the course of the investigation, right? I've heard that somewhere, and that he was inappropriate with them, right? That I don't know. Sorry. Do you agree that a lot of things that he said occurred, almost all of them, within that, I think you said April or you said maybe into early July, right? The abundance, yes. And the majority of those statements are what I would consider, I'm going to use the phrase generic, where he's just saying, I am the perpetrator of Abby and Libby, or I took the girls' lives, right? I object to the form of the question. It's cross-examination, overruled. Thank you. So another win. So Goals actually so far given him 2 wins versus the 1 win for the state. Yes, those are the statements along with others. Yes. Did you hear him early on in his period of incarceration from December of or November 2022 through March of 2023 professing his innocence? Yes, he has professed his innocence. And did you hear him doing it again July, August, September, October, and the end of the stay? The end of his stay at Westville? Well, at the last, let's just say 5, 6 months that he was there. It would vary. There are times where he professes his innocence and then he'll it up with an around the, I don't know how to explain it, but it's not a direct confession, but it'll be, something along the lines of an excuse for why he said what he said. So he will go back it he will go back to it, but yes, I mean, he's confessed his guilt and he's tried to confess his innocence. You mean profess his innocence, not confess. But yeah. And what is it accurate to say that one of the contexts in which these confessions came up is him referring back to what he told prison staff in April, May, and June? Like, does that come up often? That he talks about, I'm sorry, can you repeat the question? Yeah, like he might say, well, they said I confessed. Like he might make a reference like that in a phone call. Is that something you heard fairly routinely? Yes, but I don't consider that a confession. Right, but he's referencing these statements that occurred in April, May, and June, right? Correct. And that is part of the discussion, even into the more recent past, right? Phone calls? I'm sorry, I just want to make sure I got so he said those things more recently in phone calls, right? Yes, even since he's been in Wabash Valley. He says that he goes back and talks about the time he made the confessions now. Right. He's making references about the past and using the word confessed or confession, right? Well, he'll say I confessed, if I confess, then convict me and send me to jail so we can get this over with. He'll attribute things like that. He'll say, if I confessed, then whatever. They say I confessed, whatever. So he doesn't even remember confessing. So how is that valid? How are any of those valid if he can't even remember them? Okay, so yeah, that's kind of how he reverts back. I guess if that answers your question. Thank you. November of 2022, you told Ms. Diener that he was suggesting to, I think it was Kathy, that if they want me to just do an interview with the police, I'll do that. Yeah. He was fine with that, right? Yes, he made the statement, if this gets to me to be too much, go to the investigators and tell them, I'll talk to them, I'll tell them everything they want to know. Okay. And that was it? Kind of taking a chivalrous approach with his wife to this all. A what? He was taking a chivalrous approach to his wife with this situation, right? I mean, I that's a good assumption. I mean, I don't know. I don't really know what his motivation was, but yeah, I would think that would be chivalrous on his end if that was the purpose, I suppose. And you don't have any training in the fields of psychiatry, right? I do not. So you don't have an opinion about the impact that this long-term solitary confinement would have on his mental state, do you? No, not based on an education or degree, no. So you're just basing it on your opinion. All right. So Mr. Rosie says, I don't have any further questions. The court says Ms. Diener. She says no other questions. And that concludes Detective Brian Hirschman's testimony. All right. So we have Jerry Holman up next. Attorney Bradley Rosie calls Trooper Jerry Holman to the stand. Mr. Rosie says, may I? The court says yes. Direct examination of Lieutenant Jerry Holman. Questions by Mr. Rosie. Tell us your name. Jerry Holman, and he spells it. Thank you, Trooper. And who do you work for? Indiana State Police. Okay, and you were here yesterday and we went through all of this. You're one of the lead investigators in this case, is that right? Yes. So remember, he testified, he's going to testify every day of the 3-day hearing. Um, so just be aware of that because he's part of each of the motions. Because the motion's in limine, this is the motion to dismiss, and the other, or the motion to suppress. Sorry, the motion to suppress, and we did the motion to dismiss already. All right, so Indiana State Police, yes. Okay, and are you generally familiar with Rick Allen's detention circumstances, or have you been familiarized with them over the past 18 months or so? His detention circumstances, yes. And where he's been held, what the circumstances are, where he's been held, and where he's been transported to, those kinds of things, yes. And is that related to his circumstances at the White County Jail initially? Carroll County, Westville, White County, Westville, and then Wabash. All right, he was jumping around. Okay, all of those, right? Yes. All right. And do you acknowledge, or is it accurate to say that some of his conduct while he's been detained has been has been a part of this ongoing investigation in the case? His conduct? Yeah, the things he's saying, the things he's doing, the way he's acting, statements that he's made, all those kinds of things. Are you asking about statements that he's made? Yeah, well, and the way he's acted for, yes. Okay, and have you assigned officers in the course of your investigations to, I guess, investigate, for lack of a better word, the circumstances regarding his detention at Westville? I've assigned them to monitor his calls. Okay. And tell us who those officers are. The main one is Trooper Brian Harshman, so we already got through his uh, testimony. All right. At some point early on, Detective Vito was involved in that, but mostly the documentation and investigation of it is going to be through Brian Harshman. Okay, I think I saw also where at some point Investigator Mullen from the prosecutor's office was doing some interviews up at Westville as well. Am I correct about that? Yes, Steve Mullen, Rich Davies, myself, and Brian Harshman, I believe, were the only ones that went up there and interviewed corrections officers and or inmates. And what was it that first prompted you to either send someone up there or do some interviews or conduct some interviews yourself? Can't remember exactly the date and time, but we received information that we had made some confessions that he had made some confessions. So that after that, we subpoenaed records, any other records that may indicate any audio, video, or written statements or anything like that, and received information from the prison, and we were able to review the documentation and find out that he had confessed to not only his wife, mother, corrections officers, and inmate companions. So we got that documentation, reviewed it, found out who we needed to interview, and interviewed them. All right, very good. Thank you for that. So, who was it that first contacted you to communicate these issues to either you or your staff? No one contacted us. We were monitoring his phone calls, and once he made the first couple confessions, at some point after that, we decided to subpoena any other records that the prison might have, and they sent us those. They sent those to us. Nobody from the prison contacted us, so they just took it upon themselves to. So, how do they even know about the first confessions if they were not already monitoring him? He says we weren't contacted. We were monitoring his phone calls, and once they heard the first confessions, they went and subpoenaed everything else, all of his records. So they were like waiting for a confession, it seems almost. Okay, so you were actually monitoring his phone calls as a part of your investigation before any of this even occurred, these statements. Yes. That was a formal part of your investigation. You set that up so that you could do that while he was there. Yes. All right. And I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm trying to kind of get to the point that you did that through GTL and the GTL service. I believe that's the company's name. Yes. Okay. And did you reach out to the prison officials to get the information to communicate with GTL? I did not. Okay. I don't know who did. Some of your staff members? I don't know who did, but somebody did, yes. All right. And so basically, you were using GTL as your conduit for essentially surveilling his communications to the outside. We were monitoring his phone calls, yes. Okay. How is that? You know whether or not those phone calls would be phone calls he would have with his lawyers other than just hearing the lawyer's voice. Right. Well, the prison has set it up that those don't go to GTL. So those we don't get any communications between him and his attorneys. I don't know how they do it, but we have never listened to any conversation between him and his attorneys. Okay. Did you listen to have somebody on your staff or you listen to these calls like on a weekly basis, or is it almost like a real time thing? Help me with how this works. Weekly. Maybe a little more frequent than that, but then my view of this is that you've got some officer with a pair of headphones on sitting in an office somewhere like, okay, now I got to go through a week's worth of phone calls, and you sit down and you kind of knock them off in bulk. Is that an unreasonable view or an incorrect view of uh, an inaccurate view of what's happening? No, I would agree with that's a pretty accurate statement, probably maybe a little less or more, give or take. And did you actually listen to those calls? I mean, as a matter of routine? No. So, is it Officer Harshman that was doing that? Yes, Trooper or Detective Harshman was. Okay, primarily. There was other people that were helping, but he's primarily the one that did all the documentation of the phone calls of interest. And so I'm assuming when you get those phone calls and you're listening to them, and then you hear something that's of significance, such as these calls to his family, you then follow up with the prison, right? Not necessarily me personally. I did a few. Your staff? Somebody would, yes. Okay. And one of the things you did was you went out and got subpoenas and rounded up more information about his circumstances at the prison above and beyond the phone calls. Correct. And what was that information? What I told you earlier was an audio videotaped movements, statements from the prison, documentation from the corrections officers that were conducting the self deletion watch, I think they called them door sheets or logs that they were keeping corrections officers. At some point, it switched. They did use prisoners as a companion program, but I think after he started making the confessions, they switched and no longer allowed the prisoners to do that, and they had the corrections officers, so we got all those logs. Okay. But what about any information from the warden himself? I can't remember if that came in the first subpoena or later, but yeah, we did get some information where he wrote a letter. Okay, there, to the warden. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. A letter to the warden with about, or what about internal affairs? Any information that you got from them? Not to my knowledge. So once you received this information, did you continue to request the information to kind of continue to get updated information as he stayed at the prison? That's a kind of a, let me withdraw that question. That's kind of a compound question. Did you then routinely go through the same process to keep getting the most updated information regarding his detention circumstances? As far as the phone calls, we continued to monitor them. We still would get information if there was any, I believe, yes. I think the answer would be yes. We did continue to get information. I think the answer would be yes. You're not supposed to be guessing. And maybe a simple question, I guess, I'm just thinking now is when's the last time you asked for that information? I'm not sure exactly when we asked for the updated information because I get quite pretty ru- phone calls pretty routinely through the discovery dumps, but the written stuff not so much. Yeah, I don't think we've had. Is this an answer? I think this is an answer. Yeah, I don't think we've had received any or asked for any written. I may be mistaken, but to my knowledge, I don't think we've gotten any more written reports. Maybe that was. That's Brad Rosie continuing to speak. Okay, since he's been at Wabash Valley, then. I don't think we have, no. Okay, do you believe that you've acquired all of those when he was at Westville, all of the log sheets and companion reports and all that? Up to the point when we got the subpoena, I don't think we resubpoenaed or asked for any more information to my knowledge. Have you ever listened to any of those phone calls yourself? Yes. Did you listen to any of the phone calls, let's say between December of 2022 and March 1st of 2023, the first 5 or 6 months that he was there? I believe I listened to a few, yes. Okay. Did you hear him on any of those calls assert his innocence? I did not know. Okay. Have you ever read any reports where he asserted his innocence? No. Okay, you interviewed him twice before you arrested him, right? Once. I just interviewed him once. Okay, there were two interviews with law enforcement. Correct, right? And he asserted his innocence in both of those? Yes. Okay. And have you listened to any of the phone calls from, let's say, August 1st of 2023 while he was at Westville until he was transported in December of 2023? Yes. And did you hear him assert his innocence in any of those phone calls? No, I would not listen to the calls on a daily basis. I would just get one sent to me that I should listen to. And those are the ones that were of interest to you in terms of being incriminating, right? Yes, sir. So you were filtering just those phone calls through your staff. Correct. Okay, and so at some point then, did you start, I'll say directing, that might be a hard, kind of an aggressive word, but directing some of your investigators to go to Westville to collect information about these phone calls and log sheets and things of that nature? I don't think I directed anybody. I just said that we had some information that we needed to go conduct interviews, and we just formulated a game plan. I know one day I went up with Brian Harshman, and I know Rich Davies, Steve Mullen went up. I may have went up by myself one day, but yeah. So you went up to the prison and started interviewing guards and inmates, right? Correct. And those were people, the inmates were people that were assigned to him? Yes. And the guards were people that were specifically assigned to his cell? Yes. And you were recovering information from them, that anything that had to do with any incriminating statements he made, right? Yes. I've read those they're in transcribed form, right? Yes, they are. And those were given to the defense as a normal part of discovery process, right? I believe so. Yes. I've read those transcripts. Do you believe that you ever asked any one of the inmates if they ever heard him assert his innocence during their time with him? I don't know if I ever asked, but I think that some of the guards may have said that he had said he was innocent. Okay, I'm going to ask the same. I asked it about inmates. I'm not trying to confuse you. Yes. The question was, did you ever ask any of those inmates if he said anything other than some of these incriminating statements? I don't recall. Okay, same question with the guards. I don't recall. I'd have to look at the transcripts review. They're pretty short transcripts. When I looked at them, the interviews in my mind were pretty quick. Right. Kind of right to the point. Did he say this? Do you recall that kind of approach? I would agree with that. That's accurate. And you didn't ask any questions about the history of their monitoring him from beginning to end, did you? I believe we did, ask about his behavior and things like that. Do you recall asking them about conversations, any of these inmate companions, about conversations they had with him, aside from the incriminating ones that you mentioned or were talking about? He says, "Could you repeat that again?" Yeah, I'm sorry. Do you recall asking any of the inmate companions about any conversations with him, aside from these ones that you were interested in, which is why you went there? Yes. Some of them would volunteer that information, okay, about his behavior, and some others that he said other than what was on the logs. Okay. And we were there to talk about, yes. And what you remember is there might have been some guards that told you that he had asserted his innocence in their presence. I don't recall, but I believe I could review those. I would be able to tell you for sure if I could review those. Okay, so there were officers that went to the prison to interview guards and inmates, correct? Yes. Did anyone ever go up there to interview Dr. Walla? Dr. Walla is the psychiatrist who was treating um, Richard Allen, and she's very problematic. Very problematic. Right, so no, he never interviewed Dr. Walla, the psychologist in this case. No. Okay, what about Warden Gallipo, who we're gonna he's the 84-page transcript that we will get to in part two. So Gallipo is the warden. He says no, he never interviewed the warden. What about internal affairs officers? No. When you went to the prison, how'd you get access? I forgot who exactly. I would look up their phone number and I just call up there and I told them I needed to come in there and interview Mr. Allen and they would put me in contact with somebody. I don't remember their names. So you don't remember anybody who you talked to at the prison. Okay. I think it was a major, and they would meet me down there and search me and put me through the metal detector and then take me back to wherever I would be interviewing him or other officers. And was this the WCU unit where you interviewed these people? Yeah. So you went in the prison and then in the what I call mini prison within the prison. Not always, but I have been in. Okay, there. And I've been in the administrative building. There's a basement. They have an interview room. Did you also do some follow-up investigations based on the things that you heard in some of these phone calls or read in some of these log sheets? Other than interviewing the people that we've already discussed, yeah, let me ask a cleaner question. You acknowledge that you listened to these phone calls, right? Some of them. And you heard things that Rick Allen said, right? Yes. And you characterized those things as incriminating, right? Correct. And did you then follow up with any of those statements by going, let's say, to CVS or to contacting a family member of his to further the investigation? Some things, yes. Okay. And what do you recall doing? One of the statements, we went to CVS he had made a statement that he used a box cutter and that he had thrown the box cutter in the dumpster at CVS. So we followed up on that to make sure to see if CVS issued box cutters. Okay. And they did. And then he asked where their trash was, but it was obviously too far along that we couldn't locate where the day's dumpster was. So we'd follow up on the things like that. Yes. So this was an ongoing investigation, right? Even while he was housed at the DOC? If we had any new information, yes, we would follow up on it. And did you interview any of his family members or extensions of his family based on anything he said at the DOC? No, I don't believe so. I thought I recalled that maybe friends of his daughter or something like that might have been interviewed at one point. Maybe. I know that we interviewed his daughter and his wife, but I think that was before. Okay, I don't recall. It could be a possibility that we did. So, has your law enforcement team expanded? I guess I'd probably say hundreds of hours monitoring these phone calls and then reviewing all these log sheets and things that have been created over the course of his stay. Is that a question? That was more of a statement. I'm sorry. Did you say I heard, let me withdraw it. I'll ask a new one. Okay, thank you. Has your law enforcement agency expanded hundreds of hours, if not more, by monitoring these phone calls and reviewing these logs and statements during the course of this investigation? Yes. Okay, so like how many man hours? Like what is this doing to our taxpayers? To be all the residents of Carroll County that have to pay for his incarceration and the monitoring of all of his communications. Okay, have you been involved in how long have you been an investigator? Probably 17 years, 16, 17 years at least. Have you been involved in a case where an accused was housed in a county jail and there were log sheets generated by officers or staff of that jail? I believe so. Tell me what case. I don't know exactly what case, but I think White County. Most of my investigators would have been White and Carroll and Tippecanoe County, and I know they have log sheets. I don't know if I've ever had to access them, but and those log sheets would put, what time medication was issued, if there's an abnormal activity, and things like that that I would be able to review. But you've never done that? I have done it. I just don't know exactly what case. Oh, I thought you just said a minute ago that you don't think you've accessed them. I think I have. I don't know. Okay, to be honest with you, I know they have them. All right. I'm not sure if I've ever used them or not. I think I have. Are you aware of any circumstances in any of the county jails that you've been associated with in your law enforcement career where they assign other inmates to that jail to monitor and keep records of another inmate? No. A more simple way of putting this is right. Have you ever heard of a companion program in a county jail? No, I have not. Very unique, right? I believe so. I have no further questions. The court calls Ms. Diener for cross-examination of Lieutenant Holman. Questions by attorney Stacy Diener. At one point, you were asked if you interviewed and you were making reference to interviews and you said interview Richard Allen. You never interviewed Richard Allen, is that correct? I did. At the DOC? Oh, no, not at the DOC. Okay, I attempted to, but you did interview employees of DOC who logged statements of his? Yes. Okay. Isn't it common for law enforcement in certain circumstances to monitor GTL calls or a similar system when a person's incarcerated and talking about their crime? Yes, very common. And my understanding is typically a person is given access and they don't need to contact someone every time they listen to a call. Is that right? That's correct. So you have a login. You can access it whenever you want. Correct. No other questions. Mr. Rosie, I have nothing else. And that concludes Detective Holman's testimony, or Lieutenant Holman, right? What is he? Lieutenant. That's scary. All right, so for this next portion, we do not have the transcript of Dr. Walla. I think I went over that. There were two people whose transcripts were not provided, and they're doing this like BS thing where they're saying it has mental health records, so it can't be provided. Sorry, but no, it doesn't have mental health records. The records are already submitted into evidence. They talk about his mental health conditions, but it doesn't have mental health records that are private or should be sealed from the public because this was a public hearing and it's on record. It has been transcribed, and the content creators are trying to get this transcribed so that we can see it, read it, and provide it to you guys so you understand what is actually going on in Indiana with this poor man. But yeah, so Dr. Walla, psychiatrist who was seeing him, um, her testimony has not been provided publicly at this time, and they keep giving people the runaround when it's being asked for. But the best I can do right now for Dr. Walla are the very, very good notes that were taken by Yellow Jacket. I believe Yellow Jacket is their Reddit name. Also, I think they're on X as well. I'm not sure. But anyways, this individual went to the hearing. They took copious amounts of notes, and we're going to read through them because this is Dr. Wallace's testimony. However, I need to go take the dog out because she's staring at me and has been for a while. So hold on 1 second. All right, I'm back. All right, so let's get started here on Rosie is going to be questioning Dr. Walla, Monica Walla, who um, we'll find out what she's been observing with Richard Allen. So again, this is somebody's notes from the hearing, so it's not a transcript. It's not going to read as easily, I guess, but it's bullet points as you can see. So I'm going to do my best to just read through it and hopefully I don't mess up too much. All right, so Rosie calls Walla to the stand. Walla's background. a lead psychologist since 2011, no prior work with the DOC. So this is her first time doing DOC work. Assigned by the administration to treat Rick, always within DOC custody. While she's been treating him, he's always been in the DOC custody. So Walla and Rick's communication. Contacted regarding personal private matters, varied communication frequency. So daily for 4 months, she would talk to him upon arrival and during the self-deletion watch. Then weekly for a month until April 2023, then went back to daily with her staff, with her or her staff for 4 months. So basically she's seen him for 4 months. I mean, for daily for several months, and there was a point in time where she went weekly, and that was not enough. So they went back to daily. Um, she's involved in other level therapists, master level. I don't know what that means, but maybe you guys can interpret that. I don't know. So, contact circumstances. Contact usually occurred while Rick was in his cell during quote unquote rounds, offered once a week out of cell therapy at his cell door. So he was offered therapy out of his cell, out of cell therapy, out of cell therapy at his cell door. So he stayed in his door. I'm confused. Out of cell means when he be out of his cell, yet he's at his door cell. So or a cell door. So why? So is he not in the door, and they're doing it through the slot in the door? I don't know. Confusing language. All right, so rounds, description. Rounds involved saying, "How you doing?" through the door slit. So that was every day she would do her rounds and come and say, "How you doing?" to him. And they did not even open the port door, so just the slit. This was the standard for mental health rounds. There were 15 people in solitary confinement that she would go and do her rounds with. Cell location and rounds frequency. Sometimes Rick was in his cell, but not always in his assigned cell. Rounds occurred dozens of times a day. So they would go multiple times throughout the day to go to visit the um, inmates. Not much time was spent with each inmate during rounds. So they would go multiple times, they would go see them, just check in, say hi, but they wouldn't stay long. They would So what are they really gaining other than they're just like checking in on them to see that they're still alive? Like that's pretty much, I don't know. That's Yeah. What are you really gaining if you're not having a sit down conversation with him? All right, so visit location and the self deletion watch. Rick was placed in a holding area for Wallace visits. Rick was on a self deletion watch when he arrived at the Reception Diagnostic Center. He didn't sign anything because he wasn't even allowed a pen. So how did he waive any rights? Confidentiality and waivers. Walla is unsure if she addressed confidentiality right away. Waivers were eventually signed, and she's unsure when they were. So we don't know at what point in time of his treatment with Dr. Walla did he ever sign a waiver? And was he under sedation or Haldol when he signed? How do we know that he was in his right state of mind? Doesn't tell us. All right, so 8 items don't qualify as confidential, content unknown. 8 items. I don't know. Okay, so cell conditions. Circumstances of Rick's cell. He had an 8 by 12 feet, 8 by 12-foot cell. He was allowed 1 day per week, she thinks. Allowed recreation time 1 time a week, she thinks should be 1.5 to 3 times per week. Companion watching and clothing. No companion watch during this period. They wore smocks, which was supposed to be like a caveman garb, acted as a deterrent for recreation because reason unclear. Wieners mentioned? I have no idea. Okay. So wieners were mentioned, and the reason's unclear why they had to wear this stupid smock that he didn't like. Diener's objection. Diener objects to relevance of recreation time in relation to psychology. How does that not relate to psychology? The more free time, the more fun you have, the happier you are. I mean, duh. The more you enjoy yourself, the more time you have to enjoy yourself, the happier you feel, the better you feel about yourself. I can't even believe that's a question. Rosie counters by stating that Wallace should know about such matters. They move on. Cell video and observations. Walla probably viewed cell video. She doesn't know, I guess. She noted that he paced a lot in his cell, which was 5 steps each way, back and forth, I guess. So she thinks that he had a light on all the time, which would be considered a form of recreation? What? Light is not recreation. Being able to see is not a recreation. What? Being able to see, that's just a sense that we have. So having our lights on in prison, it's really not a recreation. That's not an advantage, I guess. I guess they could turn the lights off and make it even more miserable. So I guess it is like a benefit. If you're good, you can have a light. I don't know. I don't get this. She says it's a recreation. But having the light on 24/7 is torturous, not yeah, motorcyclists and loud cars, sorry. So having a light on all the time could be torturous, not considered recreation, I would counter. Walla doesn't know the specifics about the self-deletion watch. She believes that it's probably a good idea for him to have a light on. Why? Like at night he needs it on? No. Let the poor man sleep at night. Cell observations. Walla noticed Rick's scarred windows. So something about the windows were damaged. I don't really know what that means. She acknowledged that he slept and ate on the floor. Rick told her that there was a problem with rats, so he's sleeping and eating on the floor, and there's rats in his cell. Real nice. Walla finds this distressing. Rick was in one of the 4 most isolated cells. Confirmed true that he was in one of the most isolated cells. Verbal harassment and noise. Other inmates would yell things at Rick like K-I-double-L yourself and baby K-I-double-L-er. This bothered both Rick and Walla, as did the general noise level. So she's saying that it was loud in there. Rick's medical history and evaluation. Walla was familiar with Rick's cardiac history, so I believe he had a heart attack in the past, and he has a history of depression. There's no formal psychological evaluation that was ever conducted, no formal structured interview was ever done. Only about 15 to 20 minutes spent in an initial assessment. Walla knew Rick had major depressive disorder, and by his standards, it was not a serious condition. Walla disagrees with this assessment, so she thinks it's serious. He said it was not. Medical history highlights in 2019 he was hospitalized for depression. He was on psychotropic medications since he was 25 years old. The file indicated that Rick was at a risk of self-deletion ideation. His file indicated that. But what file? Medical file or file that the law enforcement has on him? Like, what file are we talking about? Because that makes a difference. Why is he on this self-deletion watch in the first place? Medical history continued. History of generalized anxiety disorder, yes. History of personality disorder, more severe anxiety when separated from family, yes. Code D was assigned to Rick at some point. A through E scale represents the stages of symptoms, a symptom acuteness. E equals the psychiatric ward. So he's at code D. So one level below psychiatric ward. Newcastle, usually the top choice for E level patients. I don't know what Newcastle is. Maybe it's a facility or something. Fragility and solitary confinement. Rick was fragile upon admission. Being thrown in solitary confinement led to defensive reaction. He became verbally taunting and described as having an eggshell personality, like very fragile. I don't know. Self self-deletion ideation or intake and administrative decision. There were no records that indicate that Rick was at risk uh, at the time of intake for ideation. He was placed on this watch due to high risk no matter what. What does that even mean? Due to high risk no matter what. Why can't I highlight? That would help if I selected the highlight feature here. Due to high risk no matter what. But he was not at risk. Admin was going to keep him there no matter what was said or what she said, referring to the administrative observation status. So they were keeping him there no matter what. Restrictions and the blanket. All right, so he was on restrictions till he left Westville. He was offered 1 to 3 hours of recreation per week and provided a hard blanket, which is for ideation, self-deletion ideation, so you can't hang yourself, can't create a noose or something. Companions and case discussion. Did Walla order companions for Rick? No, not at all. It wasn't her place to suggest it. There were problems with Rick's companions from the start. They talked to him about his case and other inmates. At least one companion told their family about Rick. That's really problematic here. Rick's frustration and distrust. Rick told Walla he was frustrated with his companions. I wonder why. He believed they were untrustworthy. Well, yes, of course, they're also inmates, and they have their own motives and reasons for doing things. So when Rick told Walla about the companions asking about his case, she didn't do anything about it. Walla acknowledges this is not ideal, but it is the system. So she admits that she didn't do anything about it. Companions are paid for their work. It's considered a job. So not only are these inmates getting this job to watch over Rick. They're getting paid to do it. They're asking him about his case. They're talking about other inmates. They're not, I don't think they're supposed to even talk to him. I think they're just supposed to observe. But that's problematic. That's really a problem if they are talking to him about his case or trying to sway him to confess or tell him he's a baby KILLer. I mean, who knows what all these inmates are saying? They're inmates and they're getting paid to do it. So they have more of a incentive to be there and to catch things that Rick's doing because they want to keep their job and keep getting paid. All right, so companions are paid for their work. It's considered a job. Psychology program expansion and consent. March 2023, a psych program expanded to 40 Indiana State Prison inmates. Walla thinks that the program was shut down possibly by a Dr. Goldberg, but she's unclear on that. Walla sought Rick's consent for the expanded program. Both Walla and Rick agreed the program wasn't a good fit per doctor's orders. Walla let Rick make the final decision and he said no to participating. Okay. Therapeutic services and setting counseling sessions. Rick was one of Walla's first pretrial unmedicated patients. Session location varied, sometimes down the hall for more involved sessions, sometimes in a 2 by 3 triangular cage made of concrete walls with a gate in front and a see-through grate. That sounds really unpleasant. Wabash facility comparison, similar area at Wabash with vertical bars described as a shank cage style. Walla had been to Wabash before. Traditional versus actual therapy. Rosie described a traditional therapy session which doesn't align with Rick's experience at all. No formal therapeutic evaluation was conducted. Huh? Aren't you there treating him? Aren't you supposed to do some kind of evaluation on your patients before you treat him? Before you suggest a treatment? Handouts and limited resources. Walla provided handouts on depression and anxiety. She also gave Rick a mandala, a memory book, crossword puzzles, and crayons. Administrative limitations. Walla's abilities were limited by the administration or the DOC. Her focus was on basic conversation, medication management, and general talk about Rick's condition. The self deletion safety check. We talk about self deletion to make sure they're safe, Wallace says. That's a quote. Doctor patient privilege and expectations. Question: Did Walla ever talk to Rick about expectations to doctor patient privilege? Response: unclear. Notes say, think OMG, she's so. What does that mean? I don't know. Follow up question: Does Walla even know what the expectations are? Response: Walla lists everything except confessions related to homicide charges. Additional question about waivers: Walla doesn't know. She doesn't know about waivers. All of this stuff about waiving his right. Like, does he even know what he's saying at this time? Walla's employment and notes. Walla technically works for Centurion and as a DOC contact. She's paid for by Centurion with a few employment contact switches over time, contract renewed over every 3 years. Walla made daily rounds and she made reports for those rounds. Her original notes were shredded. Why? What? Her original notes were shredded. The importance of notes on Rick's claims of innocence. Agreement that Wallace's original notes would be the best record. Wallace says Rick proclaimed innocence at the very beginning. He was fixated on his wife and believed she was misrepresented. By December 2022, Rick emphasized that he was being treated badly. So he had he got arrested in what, late October, November? So he had not been there very long and was already saying he was being treated badly. He had professed his innocence at the beginning and was concerned about his wife. So none of that has changed. He's still professing his innocence. He's still worried about his wife, and he's still saying that he's being treated badly. So all these claims are still pretty much in effect. All right. So Wallace notes, March 2023. Rick stated, "I don't feel right." Walla acknowledged his baseline is depression and categorized his condition as poor, critical, and deteriorating. She fails to mention that she'd been giving him Halidol, shots of Halidol, and oral Halidol during this time. All right, so Walla's notes April 1st. So this moves on to the next day, but it's still talking about the same thing, the motion to dismiss. So oh, wait, no, that's April 2023. These are her notes from the 2023. Never mind. Scratch that. Forget I said that. All right. So documented self deletion, ideation, and delusions. She documented in April of 2023. Wallace notes continued saying that Rick made a statement that death would bring relief. She observed him experiencing insomnia, poor appetite, hopelessness, a low self-esteem, and more, but that was unspecified. Wallace notes from April 2nd, 2023, she noted that Rick was more critical and specifics were unclear about that. At some point, emergency involuntary medication was administered once only. Reason, head injury, and self harm. There was at some point talk of him hitting his head against the wall in his cell. So it appears that he went to get some emergency um, medical treatment at that point. Wallace notes April 13th, 2023, grave disability noted. Um, she observed him consuming feces, like eating it. Considering involuntary medication via injection. This is when they begin their Halidol, I guess, or at some point they had. Maybe he hadn't been getting it yet. Considering involuntary injection, involuntary medication hearing. So they have a hearing on it. Location room 208. A hearing was held and involuntary medication was scheduled. So this must be when they're doing the Halidol. Conversation about competency. On April 21st, Walla had a conversation with Rick regarding his competency to stand trial. She believed he called her and expressed concern about his deteriorating mental state. He was having disjointed thoughts and confessing. So Walla observed disjointed thoughts in Rick. On May 3rd, Rick confessed or said, I want to confess. Walla questioned if he was being truthful as he made similar statements multiple times. His condition was worsening. On May 12th, Rick was disorganized in his thinking and not that that was a new sign, it was just increasing his disorganized thinking. And on May 18th, he had a man down incident due to his next scheduled injection. What does that mean? He fell? Janice and vegetative state. So Janice is his mother, Kathy is his wife. Janice and vegetative state. Janice was present, possibly crying, and was shown documentation of Rick's vegetative state of depression. Reference material, psych reactions to stress. Depression peak and signs of improvement. May 22nd, depression at peak noted. So his depression has been at its worst. Psychological symptoms included trembling, stuttering, buckling knees, bulging eyes. Maybe that's because you've got him on involuntary medication. I don't know, just saying. By July 11th, some signs of improvement were noted. Ongoing sessions and injections. In October, Walla and Rick were still having sessions despite Rick already being sentenced. Sentenced? That doesn't make sense. I don't know what they're trying to say there. Never mind. Or so he continued to proclaim his innocence. It's mentioned that maybe 12,000 out of 3,000 inmates receive regular injections. It's unclear what this means. Okay. Continued harassment and psychotic symptoms. In November, Rick reported still being haunted and harassed. This harassment occurred over the phone and spanned a significant time period. It's noted that a psychotic process was occurring between March and June. But this is November where he started reporting being haunted and harassed. During a psychosis noted in Dr. Walla's notes, including a catatonic state and disorganized speech. Considered a serious mental illness by Walla's standards. So at this point in time, he's in a serious mental condition. Contradiction and court statement. Ronnie, who's Ronnie? Ronnie states, Ronnie, maybe one of the companions, states he was sent here for safety, highlighting a contradiction. Question: as a doctor, do you agree that he met criteria for severe mental illness? Answer: no doubt, yes. Meaning yes. I think this is supposed to be Rozzy, not Ronnie, if I were to guess, but maybe, I don't know. Um, anyways, so no doubt, yes, Rick met this criteria. Yet the court declared the DOC to be a safe environment for Rick despite his severe mental illness. Note, that doesn't change his brain connect, possibly indicating the need to connect his condition to his treatment. SMI and solitary confinement policy. SMI patients are typically placed in solitary confinement for 30 days per Indiana Department of Correction codes. Walla acknowledges this policy. She notes this policy exists due to potential effects on the brain and because it's documented protocol. There are severe effects on the brain, and you shouldn't be in solitary more than like 15 days. So why are they doing 30 mandatory days? or at least typically placed in, they're saying. All right, exceptions and Rick's case. Exceptions to this 30-day policy are made for individuals deemed an extreme danger to others. So he's in extreme danger when he's in a catatonic state? Walla asserts that Rick did not fall under this extreme danger exception. Question: approximately how long was Rick in solitary? Answer: 12 months. Confirmed as yes. Osbrooks and IPAC versus IDOC lawsuit. Questions about the IPAC, the Indiana Protection and Advocacy Services Commission, versus the IDOC lawsuit in the Southern District Court are raised. Diener objects, claiming it's not relevant. Rosie argues that this case established policies relevant to the current proceedings. Rosie highlights rules of proof and their importance. Gull, the judge, allows this line of questioning. I just like Gull, the judge. I think that's funny. Exhibits and the DSM-4 reference. So, exhibit from the case is presented to Judge Gall. Sections 21 and 28A of the DSM-4 are referenced. Mention of the SMI, apted, potentially appointed, and a statement suggesting the DOC violating someone's rights. Shame on you, DOC, you violated rights. Diener is visibly upset, pissed, shaking her hand because they're trying to bring evidence that the DOC shouldn't be. Whoa, that was really loud. Um, so he's sorry, my boyfriend's doing stuff in the house. I don't know what. They're arguing that, or she's mad because they're bringing in data about severe mental illnesses and solitary confinement. That's what she's mad about. Um, Walla is back on the stand. Okay, so let's get back to that. Continuation with Walla 315. The deposition resumes with Walla. Mr. Allen, Rick contends that he was treated poorly due to his mental state or disability, which is not consistent with established guidelines. Diener objects, arguing that Walla lacks authority to declare whether DOC violated policies regarding his SMI status. Ronnie counters by stating, we still have to prove human. Hold on. Okay, sorry. My boyfriend's making a ton of noise and I'm getting annoyed with him because he knows I'm recording, but whatever. All right, so Mr. Allen Rick contends that he was treated poorly. Diener objects, arguing that Walla lacks authority to declare whether the DOC violated policies regarding his SMI status. Rosie counters by stating, we will have to prove human created coercion. So they have to prove that either the officers or the companions were the ones that were making him say those things, or he wasn't in his right mind, which I think he wasn't in his right mind. Foundation and DSM for familiarity. Rosie asks for foundation, seeking to establish Walla's expertise and authority. Question: are you familiar with the DSM-4? Walla responds, yes, likening her familiarity to knowing the Bible. She must read the Bible a lot, I guess. Not everybody knows the Bible. The IPAC versus the IDOC lawsuit and SMI definition. Question: are you familiar with the lawsuit between IPAC and IDOC? Walla confirms and acknowledges the case settlement defined SMI, which the DOC adopted. So this case in particular is what created the current standards. So Walla's authority and experience. Rosie argues that as lead psychologist, Walla has authority and experience to comment on treatment guidelines for patients like Rick. There's a 30-day policy and safekeeping status. Diener references 30-day policy for SMI patients and notes that Rick experienced a brief psychotic disorder. Walla explains the existence of both the PPD, the persistent depressive disorder, and the SMI thresholds that influence treatment approaches, including the 30-day policy. She states this information regarding Rick would be considered new documentation. Walla clarifies she can't comment on whether safekeeping status overruled the 30-day SMI policy during the court hearings. What does this have to do with anything? All right, so SMI diagnosis and exceptions to privilege. Diener inquires how an SMI diagnosis changes exceptions to privilege concerning homicide cases. Rosie's personal knowledge of SMI cases. A series of questions are posed to establish Rosie's extensive personal. Why are we asking him? Are we talking to somebody else? Ronnie. Ronnie or Rosie? I'm so confused who this Ronnie person is. It's confusing to read other people's notes when you don't have context on what these things are saying. Ronnie's personal knowledge of SMI cases. A series of questions are posed to establish Ronnie's extensive personal knowledge of SMI. Drawn on personal knowledge of cases you followed regarding SMI. Answer: yes. Involved listening to podcasts, etc.? Yes. Follow on Facebook? Yes. I think this is supposed to be Walla's personal knowledge of SMI cases, because what the hell? I'm so confused. Significant knowledge before Allen. Yes. Visited mental health building. Yes. Out of curiosity or international detour. Answer: intentionally. Or intentional detour, sorry. Followed more closely after unidentified individual, Keegan Klein. Answer: yes. So these are, I think he's asking her these questions like extensive personal knowledge of SMI cases. I don't know. Interested in KK's doctors? Yes. More closely than after Allen? Yes. Intentional routine to listen to podcasts on commute? Yes. Sought information on KK at work? Yes. Read Insight referring to software? Answer: yes. I think he was trying to, if I'm reading this correctly, I think it was Rosie asking these questions of Walla, because when did Walla leave the stand? She hasn't yet. She's still on the stand during these questions. So who the heck is Ronnie? I'm so confused. Does it continue with Walla? I think they're just having their own kinds of arguments here. I don't know. Let's go back to where I left off. Conflicts of, nope. Okay, personal knowledge acquisition. Could Ronnie access private documents, personal history through software? Yes. Did the did this regarding KK Keegan Klein? Yes. Is this policy violation? Yes. Side note, the girl from Murder Sheet podcast was chewing gum. Okay. Facebook comment and patient discussion. Did Ronnie post a Facebook comment after Rick's arrest, considering he was her patient? This is supposed to say Walla. I really do. Did Walla post a Facebook comment after Rick's arrest, considering he was her patient? Answer: yes. In 2021, and commented on recommended podcasts. So these are all questions to Dr. Walla, even though it says Ronnie. I think these are questions, I think it might have been like an autofill. Like she accidentally filled her notes with the wrong name. Anyways, so Dr. Walla is very into true crime, as we can see by her activities. So she listens to true crime podcasts. She has accessed private documents, personal information through software that she shouldn't have. That's a violation of policy. She looked up Keegan Klein's records, apparently, is what it looks like. This is showing us. And she follows social media groups that have to do with this case, the Delphi case and Allen and things like that. So, did she post that? Yes. Follow-up question, maybe responsible inaudible question. At any point, did Walla talk to Rick about social media content he had supporters? Answer, yes, I told him because he thought everyone hated him. So she told him he had supporters on social media. APA ethical principles and potential violations. Razi hands Walla ethical considerations from the American Psychological Association, the APA. Principle B, accept responsibilities and seek to resolve conflicts. Question, could your Walla's social media activity be a violation? Answer, I don't disagree. So her own social media activity could be a violation of her ethical APA um, principles, ethical principles. Principle E, right to dignity and privacy. It's noted that his gray area, unclear reference, I don't know what that means, conflicts of interest and objectivity. This is why we need the transcript, guys. This is why it's so important that we get the transcript from Indiana, and they need to stop, I don't want to say pussyfooting around, but that's, I mean, that's what they're doing. They're not giving us the information and saying it's because of private information, which is BS. All right, conflicts of interest and objectivity. A question about a conflict of interest regarding Wallace's intrusion. Confirmation that there is a conflict. She confirms that. Question, do you agree there is a conflict between being personally and legally involved? Answer, yes. Question, could your online activity interfere with your objectivity in treating him? Answer, no. Not not with what I need to hear to treat him. I find that very sus. Oops, that's not what I meant to highlight. I find that suspicious. I don't think you can be fair and objective if you're trying to be friends with him, trying to treat him, trying to, be the cool gal, whatever you're trying to be. What about following others on social media? No. Confidential information and note destruction. Did Walla obtain confidential information? Answer, yes. Did she make notes? Answer, yes. Were the notes destroyed? Answer, yes. Question, is this a violation of Rule 4.0? Answer, not sure. Everybody does it. What did I do with all that paper? So that's her question. Like, what would I do with all that paper? So that's why she didn't shred, or that's why she shreds her notes because she doesn't want to keep paper. Okay. Discussion about how Rule 4.0 necessitates a conversation about patient privacy, confidentiality, and exceptions with the patient. Follow up, don't think so. Another doctor may have had this conversation with Rick, but Walla is unsure. Record keeping and APA guidelines, additional questions regarding record keeping standards, Walla's response in terms of testifying, records, how we've always done it. This is how we've always done it. Walla is shown APA guidelines. Impression is that Walla isn't familiar with them, not as much as I should be, she says. So she's not even familiar with the APA guidelines and policies on record keeping and whatnot. Litigation and record keeping liability. There was a discussion of the rules regarding reviewing and preserving records in anticipation of potential litigation. This is why, look, okay, you don't want the paper? Fine. Scan it. Take a picture of it on your phone and turn it into a PDF. And then you have it online, your notes. You don't have to retype them, although you should, or you should copy them, take a picture of them, whatever, scan them, make them into an electronic file so that you can refer to them later if you need to, but they're preserved. Potential liability for the doctor if subpoenaed records have been destroyed. So that is a problem if she doesn't have her records or her notes or whatever they're asking for that she needs to turn over. That's discoverable. No, her notes are discoverable. Diener's objection and relevance. She objects, stating that they appear to be discrediting Walla. Well, isn't who cares? It's a hearing, and they have every right to if she's not up to par. I mean, she's been dabbling in the true crime community and following this case and talking to people about this case online, and she's treating the suspect. That's a huge, 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 huge violation. Conflict patient violation that should not happen. All right, so Diener's objection, she objects in saying that they're trying to discredit Walla, which I think they should. Questions, she questions the relevance to the claim that Rick's Miranda rights were violated through coercion. Well, if he's been arrested and he's invoked his right to remain silent, and they're trying to get confessions out of him through the psychiatrist or through intermediaries like a prison companion, an inmate companion, then that's coercion. Yeah, that is. And that's waiving, he hasn't waived his rights. So technically his rights are still um in place to remain silent. So anything he says after that time up until trial can be used against him. So Rosie's argument and Gold's ruling, Rosie argues the line of questioning is relevant, states that there was a violation of due process due to Rick's placement in the DOC care despite his condition. So he never should have even been there in the first place because he had severe mental illness, and how he was brought there was also illegal, which we might get, that might be in the Gallipo. I'm not sure. That might be in somebody else's testimony, but at some point in time, he was stripped of his rights, thrown in prison, not given a lawyer after being transported to the safekeeping where they put him in isolation. And he was left without a lawyer for 10 days in isolation, waiting to find out like what the heck was going on because he didn't even have a lawyer, and they just moved him without even, they basically kidnapped him and brought him to another prison for no reason. They put him in isolation. All right, so Rosie's argument and Gall's ruling. Rosie argues the line of questioning is relevant, states there was a violation of due process, highlights how DOC rules and procedures are crucial to the case. Judge Gull agrees with Rosie's assessment of relevance. Harshman guidelines and APA connection. Rosie provides the Harshman, presumably an individual involved in the case, with the APA guidelines. Question: do you agree your connection was improper? Answer: I do. Wouldn't do it in retrospect. The meaning of run at all is unclear. I don't know what that means. But whatever this, she agrees that there was some kind of improper connection in this um, somehow. I don't know what this is talking about. This is so difficult to understand without all the context. DOC directive and the RHU treatment. Rosie introduces a DOC directive from April 2022, Chapter 3, which addresses the IIAS, the individuals with intellectual and other developmental disabilities, settlement regarding the treatment of prisoners in restricted housing units. Lists appropriate facilities, notably Westville is not included as one. Walla agrees she followed the 30-day policy only because of the safekeeping status imposed upon Rick. Her statement, so the safekeeping was imposed upon him like really early on in the case, and he had no say in it. He had no lawyer to defend him, to stop it, to do anything. Her statement, it's what I was told, not my call. Wish I could have. Suggest frustration. So what is that? She wished she could have done something better for him. She wished she could have taken him out of solitary. Psychosis and confinement stressors. Psychosis induced by stressors pertaining to confinement was brought up by Walla. Focused shift in Diener's questioning. Focus shifts. Rosie departs approximately 2.5 hours later. Diener begins questioning Walla. Asks if anything important from Walla's notes was excluded from her report. She says no. So even though she doesn't have her notes that we can't see, so we don't know if she's telling the truth, she says it wasn't excluded. She put everything in her reports. Diener presents intake paperwork, possibly from a different facility. Observations about Rick. Mention of Rick taking care of himself within the confined cell space. Observations that Rick made the most of his environment and established order for himself. Confirmation that he maintained hygiene and ate regularly. But we just heard that he didn't and he ate feces. 24/7 monitoring orders. Diener asks if Walla ordered 24/7 monitoring. Walla clarifies it was for one day at the RDC due to Rick's high profile status. It is unclear who issued the 24/7 watch. That's a good question. Who issued it and why? And why was it still in place up until just recently? Makes no sense. Guard engagement and statement solicitation. Question: when the guards took over, did they engage with Rick like companions? Walla nods but says, I can't watch them. Did you see them engage? Not more than the normal bringing of food, etc. Did you even witness solicitation of statements? I didn't witness that. Indiana State Prison concerns. Question: did ISP want to talk to Alan through you? Answer: I think so. About the list and Alan, I thought it was strange. Wallace says she talked to Rick and they decided against it. The Indiana State Prison concerns. The ISP. Did ISP want to talk to you, to Alan through you? Why did they use her as an intermediary? I don't know. Rick's baseline and documentation. Confirmation that Rick's baseline is depression and anxiety. Reference to large volume of documents received in May 2013. Unclear what documents. Acknowledgement that circumstances surrounding documentation changed on April 14th. Walla hadn't seen the documents. Changes in presentation and the 24/7 watch. Notes were presented that indicated disagreements about Rick's speech processes. These notes considered recent only. Changes in Rick's presentation were noted, and a visit was deemed potentially bothersome at that time. On May 7th, a 24/7 watch was implemented, reasoning unclear. Again, like what? There's no reasons. Why are we doing these things? There should be a reason that you put somebody in a safekeeping for isolation 24/7, being watched. Companion statement sources. Clarification that previous quotes were from the companions. Okay, so they went back on some of the things that Walla talked about earlier with Rosie, just saying that they were coming from the companions. Rick's religion and crime connection. Question: prior to April 4th, did he ever say he found God? Answer: Walla can't remember, but states that Rick was not religious at intake. On April 5th, she notes or reports mentions a change in his status. Rick statements and emotional affect. Discussion centers on Rick's statements about the facts and circumstances of his charges. Notes describe the conversations as usual, checking in on how Rick was feeling, but not asking direct questions about changes. Question: does he relate his newfound religion to the crime? Initially, Walla responds that she doesn't think so. After reviewing the last line, she changes her answer to yes. Quote, affect all over the place, smiling to crying. So she changes her answer. All right, assessment. Rick offered information without prompting. His reports about his feelings are questionable, aka not genuine. So now she's just questioning his um, truthfulness out of his mouth. Okay, he's not genuine. Injection improvements and influence statements. It's noted that Rick's condition improved with the injections, unclear which injections. So, what injections was she giving him, when and where and how, and what improvements, if any? I mean, how do we know that there were improvements either? I mean, he was in a really bad state for months. Wallow reiterates that she presented the injection option to Rick, but it was not in his best interest to make statements given his legal situation. Not in his best interest to make statements, implying his attorney would advise against it. So, is he even able to make medical decisions like injections for himself. He's not in his best interest to make statements, according to her. So why do we have him? Why are we accepting his confessions if that's the case? Walla notes that in her notes, it appears Alan is feigning memory lapses and confusion. So, okay. What's her expertise in feigning, in diagnosing feigning symptoms? All right, refusal of recreation and interview. Rick refuses to leave recreation area for an interview. Okay, that was on April 12th, 2023. Diener's confusion and psychosis assessment. Diener states losing memory, unsure what's being discussed. Wallow notes that on one occasion she was asked to determine if Rick's behavior was due to psychosis or feigning illness. Well, what's the answer? She just was asked to determine. Doesn't say what. There's video footage, Halidol, and over medication. Mention of videos showing Rick being transported to receive an injection, which was Halidol, which can make you hallucinate, see things. Medication protocol, injections and oral medication, weekly Halidol, nightly for sleep. While his assessment still many days communication was impossible. So he couldn't even talk. He was in catatonic states. He was not in a good shape. He wasn't in his best interest to make statements. Yet we're going to allow all of these 60 confessions. Okay, good job, Judge Cole. Thanks. That's awful. The justice system continues to keep failing him. Even if he's guilty, this is no way for a person to be in prison. So mention of videos, receiving the injection of Halidol, medication protocol, injections and oral medication weekly. Wallace assessment, still many days where the communication with him was impossible. Concern about potential over medication. So she was even concerned that she might have been over medicating him. Observed that he slept a lot following the injection. Rick claimed he was just laying there. Prozac and Dr. Martin's consultation. In addition to Halidol, Rick received Prozac, which he was on before his arrest. Timeline unclear. Dr. Martin visited once a week, consulted about Rick's treatment, specifics not mentioned. Rick's condition improved and Halidol was eventually discontinued. Weight fluctuations and control. We're almost done, guys. So Rick was obese upon intake, intentionally skipped meals in an attempt to regain some control and be healthier. Observation, he lost weight. How do you know that he was skipping meals because he wanted to, how do you know that was his motivation to skip meals? Maybe he was so drugged up that he didn't want to eat. Observation, he lost weight, was healthy, then April 22nd tanked, not healthy, eventually rebounded to a healthy weight. Remember, he got really skinny at one point. Conflicting statements and depression symptoms. Notes indicate that Rick could be highly talkative some days in April. Conflicting statements were made that he wanted to KILL family and friends and myself. Materially, I don't want to die. Too much of a coward, I don't. Sentence unfinished. Those are statements made attributed to Rick Allen. Seizure, phone call, and tablet access. May 3rd, Rick experiences a seizure. He cries out for help and asks to call his wife, Kathy, or Kay. Kay does not answer the phone when Walla calls. Walla finds a cordless phone, locates the number, and assists Rick in dialing. Mention Rick whispering to an attorney, possibly correcting something. Oh, that's supposed to be in parentheses. Rick was whispering to his attorney, possibly correcting something for the record. Unclear how long Rick was without his tablet. Possible topic of conversation, and then Rick attempts to call Kay again. Rick's confession. I want to tell my wife what I've done. I want you to hear it. Rosie interrupts. So now we're back to Rosie, or maybe this is a rebuttal. I don't know. Not rebuttal, but redirect. So Rosie interrupts. Did he tell you that what his wife said? Rick implied to Walla she doesn't believe me. So Rick's mother and wife are both sitting there telling him, I don't believe you in your confessions, and they're telling you things, they're getting in your head, stop talking. I mean, come on. I'm it's more I think it's more solid evidence that, Rick's not this crazy type to do what accused of doing. So Dr. Diener's observations wants to address the stressors, lack of consistent communication with the team. Rick sometimes felt they didn't want to hear from them, especially during the period when he wanted to confess to many people. Yes, whose confirmation is this? Is a good question. Like, that's whose confirmation is this? Notes that finding God brought Rick comfort. Diener claims Rick said, I'm going to get right with God. Rosie says, Walla asks if progress, or Rosie to Walla asks if progress reports were noted. Notes were destroyed, she says. Dr. Walla's observation Dr. Walla has never seen Silence of the Lambs, red flag. I don't know what that, she must have said that on the stand. June's condition, Halidol, June. This person, whoever wrote this, their autocorrect really messed them up. Alan's condition, Halidol shots administered. Oh, June. June? Alan's condition in June. Halidol shots administered to June, despite her protests. Runs from one side of the cell to the other, shaking head, injury, head bruised. What? I'm so confused by some of the statements in here. It seems like this should be Alan was doing this, but I'm very confused. All right, so tests. Discussion about feigning tests. Lori, just crayons and pencils, huh? Walla, no, don't have them. Rick's physical state, lost 30 to 40 pounds in 2 months, technically obese at intake, but not extremely unhealthy. Rick's desired transfer, he wanted to go to Transport State Hospital because he thought his family could see him there. ISP involvement, who, it's unclear, calls Harshman ISP name initials unclear, in his 40s or 50s, detective for 17 years, assisted in homicides, involved in Delphi, early 2020 Marshall's Regional Task Force. Once Allen was arrested, he was put in charge of monitoring the communication. So that's talking about Harshman, so which we already read through. So that was leading into that. So kind of read it out of order, but whatever. So we read through the Lieutenant Jerry Holman's testimony, Detective Brian Harshman, who monitored all of the communications apparently, and we went through Yellow Jacket's notes. Who, I mean, thank you so much to Yellow Jacket. I just wish maybe they had proofed them and corrected them first a little bit, but that's okay. It was a little hard to read some of those without some context and not knowing, and some errors too, like who the heck is June and Ronnie. But you know what? It's okay. We got through it and we figured it out. So join me next time for part 2 of the motion to suppress hearing, where we go through Warden John Gallipo's testimony. So we will find out maybe some more about his transfers and things like that, how he got to where he was, what his conditions are like. So we'll learn more of that in part 2. So please hit that like button. Make sure you are subscribed, and I will see you guys in the next one. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, guys. Bye now.